So as we kind of like shift gears into the how behind how this actually works, which I know we've touched on a little bit, let's just talk about let's just talk about the entire kind of end to end of, okay, so if I'm a creator and I want to leverage this, I would tell someone to comment or DM. What is the call to action typically, that they'll comment a keyword, and does that trigger the DM? Is that how it kind of initiates?
That's correct. Yes. And that'll be the main one to focus on. I alluded earlier to the fact that there are over 8 different ways to kind of trigger the automation, but without overwhelming people with all the options, the posts are where you're going to get the most traffic. So focusing on that is going to make the most sense.
And does that include like I've seen this in reel captions as well. Does that track with like commenting on reels as well as word posts as well as every other type? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So any kind of post that's going to go on your feed, whether it's a like single image, a carousel post, any kind of video size, which now all get uploaded to reels, all those will be eligible to receive a comment and then be able to send an automated DM thereafter.
Very cool. So I've seen people, they comment, and then there's typically the person comments back and says, hey, it's on its way. Is that automated?
Yes, that is automated as well. Yes. So that's another step to the process is you comment, you then can receive, and this is optional. So if it doesn't feel organic for you, we do have some clients, very small handful of clients where they're like, we never reply to any of our comments. So it would be weird if we started to do this. But if you have a newer audience, as in like you're newer to content creation and you're still building up those habits and things, then absolutely leveraging automated comments will be a valuable way to like let people know that you've sent it over and also reciprocate to them on the post instead of it just being people commenting, but you actually getting back to them and saying, hey, like, thanks for, engaging. Thanks for letting me know you want that. Just sent it over to your DMs.
Oh, I love that. And then they can expect that you'll send the link. Now, are you sending, like as the creator, are you sending the link to the thing? Are you sending a landing page link? Are you sending them a link to the actual content? Are you chatting with them? What's like the logical flow that you're going to go through with them in the DMs? Like what's the typical conversation look like?
So the, let's say, best and most ideal thing that you can do is send them an initial message that then asks them for their email, and then you can deliver the thing in the DMs, but you also now have their email and could email it over to them. Now, that is a little bit more complex to set up. So to not allow that to deter people where they get to that point and they're like, oh my gosh, this is tough, throw your hands up in the air, give up, and come back to it in a year. Instead, you can just send people links to your landing pages or whatever you want to point them over to. Or if you're even like, I would like to just receive more inquiries about our services, then you could just not even send them any links and just say, hey, like, thanks for connecting, and then ask them maybe a question that then you can jump into and manually answer. So those would be the 2 easiest things to start with so that people don't get too bogged down with that first step of like, okay, now I've got to collect my email platform and, all these things. It's just do the thing you're already doing or some of the ideas that we've been sharing here, but just use the DMs as a way to deliver that thing initially.
Yeah. And I love the idea of using something like a free offer, because then there's just so much less resistance over people trying to buy something from you if they know they're talking to the DM chain. It's a little bit like, it's a little harder to sell directly in the DMs and be like, hey, buy my thing, click here. And it's just a little bit different. It's like, whoa, I just met you. Like I just commented on your post, calm down. But having the free offer is really easy. It's a low commitment, low risk situation for the person on the other side. And they can start that conversation. Now, here's a question. If somebody downloads my thing, I put the free offer out, I did the funnel. Is there like, does that conversation just end, or can there be like a, hey, I know you downloaded my mindset refresh thing. How are you liking it? Did it help you? Is there now a follow back loop? Because I feel like with email, it's a little trickier to do that, and it's less likely you'll get a response back if you actually reach out after. So is there like a loop back?
Yes, there is. And you can automate any of that follow-up as well. So that can be a great opportunity. Like you said, if you don't want to sell people right off the bat, you want to say, hey, here's this free valuable thing that I'm sharing with you. And now, I'll check back in. You can even set the expectation like, I'll check back in a couple of hours and see, how it was, how you found it, any questions you have. And then you can drop back in with that message. And like you said, it's a lot more casual than email, but you're also going to get a much higher response rate. So keeping it just short and sweet is best so that you can get some initial feedback from people. And then also use that as an opportunity to then say, cool, I'm glad you found it, to be helpful or whatever, you had this question. And then that can now lead into, once again, some kind of qualification for your services if they share information that you think is aligned with like who your ideal target would be.
That's a great point too, qualification. Are you seeing use cases where people are using it not only just to drop their free offer, but then to go the next step and ask questions about the person that might help qualify them? Like we would normally have a form or a survey or a submission sheet, right? To say, are you a good fit to be a client? Now you can actually ask them these questions, right? In a conversational tone.
Exactly correct. Yep. So you're able to use, and you can quite frankly ask as many questions as you want to with all the automated back and forth and even follow up to be like, hey, I didn't receive your response on like what exactly you're looking to do right now with your finances. Like, mind letting me know so I can best support you and guide you. So there's ways to do that as well. But we do use qualification usually either at the end of a process, like, hey, you just got this free thing. And then we'll ask the first question to get people into that process. Or we can do that as the beginning because people know that, hey, I am maybe applying to work with this company, so I'm going to have to answer a couple of questions. And through that process, we see a much higher completion rate for that, like usually somewhere between 75 to 90% completion compared to what you're typically going to see on a website form. If you're tracking those analytics, you're going to see a lower completion rate, usually anywhere between sometimes 15% to 30% is on average what we see for people who sell, higher ticket products or higher ticket services, where there is just a little bit of like, you want to make sure you're asking the right things. You want to make sure people are invested enough, but like leaving a form is super easy, whereas you can always send a follow-up in a message because you now have a communication channel with them.
Yeah, and you know where they left off. You can actually see the whole history.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too, you mentioned like the completion rate on the forms. I think you're absolutely right, because personally, if I get to a form on a website and I'm like, you're making it this hard to just have a phone call with you and there's like 40 questions on it, it gets a little bit daunting. But if you ask me one question at a time and I don't actually know when they're going to end, even if it were 40,
yes,
I would still not do that. But I would probably, it becomes a little bit more targeted too. I love that. Now here's without getting too techie, when we come to these questions and they're answering questions, because there's one thing to be like, comment the word or DM me the word and you get the link, which is very simple of an exchange. But when you start asking questions and you start saying, hey, like, what's your biggest struggle right now in your business? And they answer. Now, are you capturing that? Is that captured somewhere where now you can refer back to it, or you can reach out to that person personally? You actually can gather that information and store it in your database?
Yes, absolutely. So all of that, pretty much any response somebody gives you can get stored and saved and uploaded into your database so that way you can leave some things more open-ended. Now, one thing to think about too is we want to make it as easy as possible for people to have to make as little decisions as possible throughout the process. And for that reason, as well as others, we try to make as much as we can multiple choice so that A, it's easiest for your automation to know, hey, this person, like out of these three options I gave them, they said option one, and now I can customize that path a little bit more. Let's say maybe it's an income question. It's like, well, we wouldn't really want to ask open input too much because this person might say, I made, 80K last year, but this year I'm on track for 150K and blah, blah, blah. Instead of being like, hey, where is your income bracket so I can, best support you, see if this is for you, as one example of something. So it is great to get those open input when it's like data you want to collect or something that's not going to necessarily affect the qualification process. So we'll usually use a mix of like an open input question and multiple choice to make sure we're just giving people the right info.
Yeah, I love that. And even in my example, right, when I say what's the biggest challenge you have in your business right now, I could say which of the following best describes you, right? And give four examples. And they could actually self-segment into that description, or they can even just say like none of these, right? Maybe it's just like, nope, something else. And then you can jump in and actually converse with them. I love that there's so many different ways to, like you said, it's not spammy, because what it's doing is just really keeping it focused. I would say it helps you keep it really focused to collecting the right information, you not wasting time, and being able to actually have a really targeted conversation. It actually saves the user time as well when you guys aren't going back and forth on voice notes.
Yep. Precisely. Yeah, it really does. And that's why, we talked earlier about, hey, do people like this? Like, are people going to find it annoying or not feel genuine? It's like they prefer to just like give me all the info that I'm looking for. Otherwise, I'm going to go move on and find somebody else is unfortunately, but also just the case, right now with consumer behavior. In fact, with all of us, right? It's like, hey, you want to buy this thing online or you want to learn more about this. If they take too long to get back to you, you've probably moved on, whether you're actively searching for someone else or maybe you get served an ad or however it happens, you end up doing business with someone else and that person lost your business simply because you weren't able to be there in, enough time. So being able to get that to people quickly and helping them make a decision is really the best way you can frame it too, especially for, people who are in your position or who have a similar business type. It's like, you want to just get people the info that they need to make their decision as quickly as possible.
I love it. And you mentioned too that there's also the customer support angle. So can you
Yes.
also use this for like FAQs as well? If people have constant questions on DM, like personally, now I'm already going, can I deduct blank is 100%
Yep.
my number one question.
Exactly. So you can definitely set up FAQs in two ways. A, you could show like, hey, here's some common questions we get. And actually it looks in the DMs like a carousel post looks on your Instagram. So it's kind of like rich media in that way. It's very easy to consume. So you could say, hey, here's our top 5 FAQ, a nice, looking graphic, and then they can click in to see the response. But it could also be someone messages you and it's like, hey, Shannon, like, can I deduct XYZ? And then you could go back to them and say, hey, it sounds like you're asking about if you can deduct XYZ. If that is what you're asking, like, here's what I'm sharing. And we typically frame it in the way that I just shared so that we're not assuming what they asked just because AI and automation are not quite there yet. I'm sure one day we will be where it's like it knows exactly what you asked in the exact context, but just so that, we give people an answer without like assuming anything, especially if they sent a super long message to you. You can get that FAQ to them. And then you could even notify yourself with a couple of different ways, whether it's an email or even things like a Slack message or a text to be like, hey, this person asked you something in Instagram. And now you can come back in and like finish up that conversation with them as one of the many pathways, that could take.
Yeah, I think that people underestimate how many different pathways there are with something like this because we may have only seen a couple of use cases on a very simple scale, which is the like sharing a podcast episode or offering a free guide or something in the DMs. But when you really master how this works and how you can leverage it, there's almost an unlimited number of use cases on how you could actually apply it depending on how you want to be interacting with your audience. Can you think of this is going to sound really funny, but can you think of anyone who wouldn't use this? Or like anyone who can't use the chat funnels, or you wouldn't recommend it?
Not really, honestly, as long as now it's not so much like that you wouldn't ever use it, but it's more so the timing of it. So I'm going to slightly reframe your question, if that's okay, to like, when is the right time for me to do this? Because what you don't want to do is add this on to a stack of like other tasks that you need to get done as a business before you start to like scale. Because this is what you want to use to add fuel to the fire, but you don't necessarily want to start with this if you don't have your services and your offers dialed in. If you don't have maybe let's say a simple email system set up so people can talk to you there. Maybe if you just don't quite know even like who you want to be serving as clients. So those things are important. And some of the main things that we just recommend to people before they start to implement this, because oftentimes if they don't have these things in place, it means that they need to structurally set up something else in their business first and then come back to this, is you want to make sure you're posting consistently on Instagram. And typically what that looks like for the average account is at least 4 times a week on the platform. Now, if you're posting less than that, but you are getting engagement on your posts and you're happy with where that's at, great. Then, you could qualify yourself for that characteristic in a sense, but posting at least 4 times a week allows you enough opportunities to drive traffic to this. The second thing is having some kind of way to like generate ROI from this instead of just using it for engagement, which is super helpful as well. But ultimately where it's really going to shine for you and be worth your time and, like financial investment of softwares and, different things like that is making sure you can have an email list you want to grow, get more clients for your services or anything else that's going to allow you. Maybe it's even an affiliate thing like, hey, check out this high yield savings account or something like that you still get paid for. Being able to promote that still brings you in, tangible business value and revenue. And then also simply making sure that there's someone on your team or you who can own this. That's just the biggest mistake, by and large, from like new tech or new things in your business is, oh, this is a great idea. Let me go in and do this. And then it's like spread across maybe 5 different people, or it wasn't clear who's going to own this. And so just having that conversation and making sure internally, hey, this person's responsible for the success of this. And when you do those 3 things, then that way you're set up to now go into this with the right momentum and be able to use it now continuously, instead of, starting this initiative and being like, oh, darn, actually, like, this isn't really doing anything for us. We should stop this and pause it. And now it was a little bit of a waste of time to go into it that early, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think it like anything else, like implementing any system, it's like the system isn't the magic. It's how you're using it and how you're applying it in your business. If you have and frankly, if you have a crap offer, this is not going to help it.
Yes, exactly. You cannot shine the turd, as they say.
Yes. So it really comes down to quality content, quality offer, quality process, and then you're able to integrate this in.
Yeah, exactly right. And at the end of the day, you also don't need to be too perfectionist where it's like, oh, I'm just going to keep pushing this back. It's like, my content's not good enough yet. It's like, if you have just those parameters in place, it's going to be impossible for you to fail with this. As long as you are continuing to post, as long as you have a thing that you can sell, you will find a way to do it. And maybe it may take some trial and error, but that's okay. Like with anything, that's a part of the process. And once it's working, it really works well. And it's going to save you so much time in the long run. And in fact, we didn't talk too much about like how much time people can expect to save with this. But on average, our clients will automate 85 to 95% of their DMs within usually 4 weeks of implementing this. And so whether you're like getting a ton of DMs right now and you're like, oh, thank God, that'd be helpful. Or you're like, we don't really get that many DMs. But when you start to use this, you will be seeing 2 to 3 times more DMs coming in. And that also means leads and sales for you, right? And so that's going to be the beauty of it, is that it'll automate itself pretty quickly. And so the trial and error that I'm talking about is more so in your content, kind of getting people into the DMs, and then also making sure that, like you said, we're maybe not like, putting people off by being like, go buy my stuff like immediately, but figuring out what does that process look like? Maybe for some of you it is go buy my thing or sign up for a trial of my service or something like that. But it really is about just honing in on like what's going to work best for your audience.
Yeah. And you mentioned not waiting until the content is perfect. And I think that, it's more about quantity over quality sometimes. Is just getting content out there, even if it's not perfect. 80% is better than nothing. But also, yes. I will say this, to reframe that mindset is, I'll tell you how much easier it is to create content when you're not stressing about having to sell in it all the time. So when you actually have the mind space open, like it was when I outsourced my social media, and then when I implemented this, like I had the same kind of awakening of going from, I have to post, to now the posting is handled and the calls to actions are super dialed in, that now I'm posting more because it's just fun.
Yes. I'm so happy to hear that.
And that's what it should be. That's what it's supposed to be. It's social media. Now I'm going on and engaging and spending my time engaging with other profiles instead of stressed out over my own stuff. And that's really, I think, the unlock of not only just, and it's so funny because that's when you get the results, is when you stop trying to like watch the pot boil.
Yes, exactly. I really love that you brought this up, because there is so much emotional benefit that you get from this as well that, I don't always want to lead with, because it's like, hey, it's hard to believe without seeing the numbers. But once you understand the data and everything that we've talked about so far, the emotional relief of, like you said, not having to worry about how am I going to sell? How is my Instagram going to bring in leads? Like, does this even make sense for me to keep posting? That's one of the biggest things that I see is like people will, for example, apply to work with us. We get about 1,000 to 3,000 people who apply to work with us every month. And a lot of the time, the people who aren't posting consistently, when we ask them, they say, hey, it's because I just wasn't getting money back from it. Like, it just wasn't worth my time. And we're like, well, look, here's, how you can shift that. But then also now you won't have to worry about that going forward once you implement this. And like you said, it brings the fun and excitement back into content twofold. You get to be more creative without as much of the stress, but then also, that this content is going to bring in new business for you.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, I know we were going to dig into the results a little bit. You mentioned the time savings. You also mentioned a ridiculous amount of money on the front of the first part of the episode. How much money is this generating for your customers?
Yeah. So with all the chat funnel systems that we've implemented, which means there's usually, multiple chat funnels or just like one kind of thing that really worked for our clients. Overall, we've now helped our clients generate over $60 million in sales and
Wow.
counting every day.
I love it. So, okay, tell me about how people become a client, how they work with you guys, how they can basically tap into your brain, Natasha, and start implementing this for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we'll have, I believe in the show notes, is going to be a link to something that actually shows you what this all looks like. And we'll also invite you to be able to dive in a little bit deeper with a training that I have that'll walk you through all of this and kind of figuring out where do you start for your business. So that's what I invite everyone to do is just like, again, even if you're super skeptical right now, but you're like, but Shannon's saying, this might work for me. Like, I want to give it a go. Just come and at least learn about how it looks and how it works. And then in terms of how we work with our clients, the process that you went through, Mel Abraham, who we talked about, who's a dear friend of the both of ours, we have a 4-week process where we lead companies through how to eventually own this independently for yourself. So you're not having to rely on like an ongoing retainer from an agency or a service provider doing this, but we help you set up that system for yourself. And we launch your first chat funnel, which would be your first automation that allows you to collect sales or leads from the DMs within about 2 weeks. And then we work together for 4 weeks to ensure that you and your team, if it's just you, fantastic. If you've got, like you said, social media manager or somebody on your team who wants to maybe own this in-house, they'll know exactly how to essentially rinse and repeat the process. So any new campaigns, all the ideas that, are starting to come up for you, you'll know how to implement that going forward for yourself as well.
I love it. So basically, 4 weeks, you can basically get a campaign running and be able to lather, rinse, repeat. And what's so valuable about that, I can speak from experience, is the accountability of like, very specific. This is what we want you to do this week. This is what we want you to do here. And if you're not the creative, you don't work with a blank canvas like myself, the document you guys have us fill out is insanely helpful. It is basically a checklist of like getting your voice dialed in, figuring out how to automate. Like, you'll never get a DM from me. This is like, hey girl, hey, or whatever. And I was like, I just don't want this stuff I want it to sound like me. And it truly does because I wrote it. It really is me. So I love that it infuses that and encourages that. And I just had so much fun working with you guys and getting that built out. And, it's not as structured and standardized as your process is, which I admire. Everyone can make it their own. And that's the cool mix that you have, is that everybody can use it in their own way and get the right guidance. So I would encourage anyone who's thinking about this to check out what you guys are doing. And the visual helps so much. I'm telling you, go check out the visual on how this works, because Natasha and I can tell the story all day, but it's like, but how does that actually work? How does it actually look? You'll get all those answers and more with the link.
Yeah, 100%. I really appreciate you sharing that and the feedback on, the whole process. Cause like you said, everything now that we've had, we put so much time and energy into this. This is the main thing that my team of now 16 people and I have focused on for the last, 7 years. So it's, what we've become really good at. But like you said, we try to make it as easy as possible for you to infuse your voice into it. And so it's really about combining rather your data with our data of here's everything that's going to work in the frameworks, but then it's really going to sound like you, feel like you, and it will resonate with people. And we do everything we can in our power to help you have that convert for you well. And so your whole Instagram monetization and sales process could completely change over the next 4 weeks with that process. So excited to hear from you all. And ultimately, like, I'm here as a resource first and foremost. I know that everyone has a bunch of things going on in their business. So even if you're here and you're like, I don't know when I would implement this or how this would work, like, feel free to send questions my way as well after the episode, because at the end of the day, it's all about just like knowing that this exists now. And at some point you're going to find a use case or have it be valuable for your business. And I'm so happy that you're here learning about it and hearing from Shannon about it as well.
Absolutely. And where can they send those questions, Natasha? What's the handle? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, the easiest place will be Instagram, of course. So at Natasha T. Willis will be my handle that you can reach out to. If you want to talk to our team, we're at School of Bots, but you're welcome to reach out to me directly. Let me know you came from the episode. Let me know, what questions and things are kind of top of mind. And I'm always happy to jam on any ideas or kind of figuring out where you might start with when it comes to implementing this into your business.
I love it. Make sure you DM Natasha at Natasha T. Willis on Instagram, right?
Yep. You got it.
We'll make sure all those links are in the show notes so you can check out more information. Natasha, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a great conversation.
Absolutely. Same here. This was so much fun. And honestly, my favorite podcasts are the ones where I can sit down with people who like understand the process like you and can really speak about it as well, from people who just are like, hey, I understand kind of what this is, but like, could this really work for me? So I love all the points that we talked about. And this was just so much fun. So thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thank you.